Time to have a rant, time to share my views, my thoughts on the Olympic Games. This may be a controversial topic, it may be something that people disagree with, and I'm only putting out my thoughts, my views, and just something for you guys to consider. For me, growing up as a youngster, I was mad passionate about the Olympic Games. It was the absolute biggest sporting stage in the world. It was something that I aspired to be part of. I wanted to be an Olympian. At the age of 9, I never thought for 1 minute that that dream would become a reality, but I had a dream. And through opportunities that were provided and through many years of serious hard work, I turned that dream into a reality. And I've been very fortunate to represent Great Britain at 2 Olympic Games, Athens 2004 and Beijing 2008. I remember stepping foot onto the Olympic platform for the first time, and the goosebumps that ran through me were just insane. For me, the magic has gone. The magic has disappeared. The magic is, I don't know where it is. I've seen over the last 2 decades, the Olympic movement change. It's gone from being the whole amateur approach where competing at the Olympic Games is the biggest thing an athlete can do, to being very inclusive, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing in any way, and having more sports represented. I think that's awesome. I think having such a diverse range of sports is fantastic for inclusivity and for giving more people that opportunity. But what has really happened is where other sports have been brought in, some of the original sports are being pushed out. Now, let's just clarify one thing. Weightlifting right now is in the Paris Olympic Games, but we are out thereafter. That's how things stand. Now, the reason we're out, weightlifting as a sport, even though we're one of the originals, is because of doping. Is because our sport has a stinking reputation from some goddamn awful countries with systems that endorse it and support it. And it makes my blood boil right now just saying this. Because it's countries like that and officials like that and governments like that that have ruined it. They've given our sport, they've tarnished our sport with a reputation. And it's not just weightlifting, it happens in many sports. But regardless, weightlifting have been called out and too many athletes, too many weightlifters have been caught. So, quite rightly so, any sport that has such a tarnished and awful reputation has the right to be kicked out. Hopefully, fingers crossed and keeping everything crossed, that our sport will be revamped, have a significant change in the powers that be in the World International Weightlifting Federation, and will be reinstated. That is my hope, and I'm sure that is the hope of many other people that support weightlifting. But my frustration is, years ago, before women's inclusion in weightlifting actually, Great Britain, or any nation, could send a team to an Olympic Games for weightlifting, and they could put a full team out, which I think at the time was 7 or 8 men. Then the inclusion of women's weightlifting came about, and in order to incorporate and accommodate women's weightlifting, they capped the number of weightlifters. So weightlifting as a sport, as have many others, been capped at a certain number of athletes. Now what has happened more recently is that instead of being able to send a full team, you're only allowed to send a limited number. So for example, let me get my numbers right now, we currently have 10 categories for women, 10 categories for men, yet at the last Olympics, I think only 8 categories were represented. But as a nation, the maximum number of athletes you could send was 4 in the women's. Forgive me, I think, was it 5 or 6 in the men's maybe. So either way, you couldn't send a full team. So let's take a country like China, for example, who have a fantastic reputation for winning world championships and having world records and so on. Even if they were good enough, they couldn't send a lifter in each category. Even if they had a lifter that would win the Olympic Games, they could only send their maximum quota. So they couldn't represent in all categories. So for that reason, for me, the Olympics suddenly is no longer the pinnacle. It's no longer the biggest sporting stage. The World Championships are. For a weightlifter to win a World Championships is far harder than it is to win an Olympic Games because we're capped, because countries cannot send enough lifters to be competitive. Now we come to the situation where we go into the Paris Olympic Games, and instead of being allowed 8 categories for men and 8 categories for women, so we've lost 2, they're now cutting it to 5. So now only 5 weight categories can be represented in the men's and in the women's divisions. Suddenly you've lost half of the best in the world. And now people are fighting for those 5 categories. People are having to force their body weights up, force their body weights down to be competitive in whatever category will be in the Olympic Games. And that to me means that our sport is no longer inclusive. Our sport used to be inclusive where there was always a category for you no matter what your body weight. Whereas now, if you want to be at the top, you've got to fall into one of those Olympic categories to be able to compete on the big sporting stage. That to me is wrong. You take some other sports, I believe Taekwondo, forgive me, I've commentated on Taekwondo, I don't know how many categories they normally have, but only 3 I think it is, could be represented at an Olympic Games. Therefore, the Olympic Games is not the biggest sporting stage in the world for that sport, because it's only such a select number of people that can compete. Now let's take football as an example, and again, this is just my views, but competing at the Olympics in football is not the biggest football tournament in the world. Competing at the Olympic Games in tennis is not bigger than competing at Wimbledon. Golf, I don't need to say much about golf at the moment. You know, golfers are going where the money is. The Olympic Games is nothing. You don't get, you know, you might get endorsements from it, but nothing in the way that you would normally get paid from the other tournaments. So suddenly, we now have sports in the Olympic Games as part of the Olympic movement that are there for the money. It's all about endorsements. It's all about commercialisation. It's no longer about the passion. It's no longer about being an amateur. And of course, things have to change, things have to evolve, and I don't disagree with that. But I think we're losing the roots of what the Olympic movement was all about. We're losing that electricity that goes through, or that went through my veins, to know that I was on the biggest sporting stage in the world. There was nothing bigger. And now I just feel like weightlifting, as many other sports, are there as a token and not the pinnacle. These are just my thoughts. Feel free to comment and share yours. I really hope that weightlifting pull their finger out and we get reinstated beyond the Paris Olympics, and that the IOC see the benefit and the need to make this a really special event once more and make it fully inclusive for the sports that they've got as part of the Games.